This is Lindsay McDougall on ABC Illawarra.
It is indeed, and if you were sitting in a room with the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Philip Lowe, a man who has become a little bit of a celebrity, or at least a recognisable figure in the last few years for differing reasons, I guess a voice of calm during the pandemic, turning into, I guess, a figure of criticism since the pandemic and since interest rates just keep going up and up and up, and we do keep hearing that they will continue to go up, some banks suggesting a couple more. Same banks, I should say, are also posting massive profits. Not maybe all because of the interest rates, but you know. Anyway, he has been doing exactly that. He has been criticised for Philip Lowe, for not fronting the media, not fronting the press. He has been fronting Senate estimates, and he has been answering a raft of questions from the treasurers, from the opposition, from the Greens, over lots of things. And we'll talk about all of this with Martin North, financial analyst from here in Thurrool, about the thinking behind the RBA's decisions and whether it's just him or whether it's the board, and, you know, what could potentially change at the Reserve Bank of Australia to make things a little bit, I don't know, make things easier on the people who their decisions affect. So we will talk about that here at ABC Illawarra. What do you reckon? Do you think that Dr. Philip Lowe, the head of the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, he may be one of the most unpopular people in Australia at the moment? I mean, mortgage owners who borrowed up to their eyeballs are in worlds of pain. Renters facing rising costs as a result of that, choosing between dinner or paying their rent. Dr. Lowe has been the face of this issue, and today he faced the pressure from politicians during Senate estimate hearings. So what did he say in defence of the RBA's decisions? Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics based in Thurrool has been watching Senate estimates today. Good afternoon, Martin.
Hi there. Was
there a guillotine rolled out by the senators today?
Well, it was an interesting sport, actually, because quite a few of the senators bowled pretty strong deliveries at him, but he played them all back with a very straight bat, actually, and, stuck to his script, which is that, well, inflation is something we have to deal with, because if we don't deal with it, it's going to actually be bad for everybody, and therefore, unfortunately, interest rates have to go higher, and that means that some people are going to get, significant pain. It really was, nothing stunning coming out of it, but they had a good go at him.
All right, so this is one of the things, the public backlash on the rising interest rates. He's also been under pressure. The Greens are calling from the government to sack him. Jim Chalmers has been kind of vague about giving him a second term as governor. Was this, how did he go explaining his thinking behind the decisions, and do you think he has calmed the public?
Well, look, I think he said what he has consistently said in recent times, which is that inflation has to be crushed. If we don't get inflation under control, everybody loses, and I think that's probably true. Of course, what he didn't say was that he created the problem in the first place because, of course, he took interest rates ultra low, was involved in the term funding facility and other programs that actually were designed to protect the economy through the COVID crisis. And he did say, look, we didn't know in 2020 where this was going to go, so it's probably a bit of insurance policy that was worth taking out. But I do think he was too slow to react to the changed environment. I think the other point that's worth saying, it's not him. It is, there's a board. There's 9 people who actually sit around the table. He was very much at pains today to say, look, it isn't me. It's this group of people around the table who are just, and by the way, somebody from Treasury is there as well. So, the government is represented on this discussion as well. So there is this sort of broad discussion, and they come out with decisions, and then his responsibility is to communicate those decisions. He did, I think, also concede that maybe the communications had not been as effective as they might be in trying to explain why he's doing what he's doing. And he did say that he spends time meeting with bankers and other groups of people to try and get feedback. But I don't think he necessarily gets enough feedback from ordinary businesses and ordinary households. And I think he pretty much conceded that maybe that's something that needed to be thought through. There's a review going on at the moment about the future of the Reserve Bank, the way the shape
works. Of the board, isn't it? Yeah, the makeup of the board, yeah.
Yeah, and so maybe one of the things I'll be talking about, as well as perhaps getting sort of more external representation around the table there, is I think we need to get more community engagement and involvement in this process, because I really don't believe that those decision makers really understand the full consequences down on the ground, real households, real businesses. A lot of people are squealing at the moment, and of course the prospect is that interest rates will continue to rise. So for me, that's a really important part of the puzzle. The other thing, of course, he did say was that he'd spoken to a group of bankers the other day, and he got some flack for that, because basically the bond rate moved, and so the market said, well, did you say something, And he said, no, the New Zealand bond market moved the same as well. So he tried to deflect that, and actually said, look,
yeah, can I take us to that? Because that was he's been criticised for not speaking publicly about stuff or not communicating enough. But he does. Yep. He was a private lunch hosted by a financial firm. He was at pains to express that it wasn't linked to a rise in bond yields. In fact, this is what he said. He did concede appearing at the lunch instead of fronting the public did kind of look bad.
I thought that was manageable, but I hear many people are concerned about that. So we're responding to that, and we'll no longer do those type of lunches before the release of the statement on monetary policy.
I mean, does that explanation sit well with you in terms of, it's not the reason for for the sales and the buyers and all that sort of stuff, but also does it also show that maybe he's a little out of touch with who he should be mixing with?
Well, I think there's two things. There is always the appearance, potentially, of insider information being shared. Now, he claims, of course, he didn't say anything that hadn't already been said before, but we weren't there, so we don't know. We do know that the bonds moved. But more broadly, like I said, I think there's a really important engagement discussion here about how we get ordinary Australians more involved and engaged around these critically important decisions, because at the moment I feel that a lot of these central bank decisions are taken in a bit of a vacuum. They get paid a lot of money. They don't really care what happens to interest rates in their own personal financial world, because they're not actually the same as ordinary people. So somehow we have to get the voice of ordinary people plugged in directly, I think, to what's going on. And it's interesting because there were a few questions, bowled by the senators as to whether there were other levers that could be used instead of just the blunt interest rate lever to try and actually deal with the inflation. I think nobody disagreed that inflation is a problem that needs to be crushed. But, are there other levers that could be pulled, or are we really just down to this one lever? And is the government standing back and saying it's not our problem, it's the RBA's problem, So to an extent, has the government stepped back and said it's his problem, and maybe they're actually using Lowe as a scapegoat. And
then saying, well, it's an independent organisation, so we can't do anything about it. Although, I mean, there has been a lot of discussion about that. I know Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones has been under pressure. Simon Birmingham said he should stop commenting on the RBA or risk being pushed out of cabinet. Jane Hume asked if Philip Lowe had met with Mr Jones and spoken about policy. I think Dr Lowe said MPs are free to say what they wanted. There was also, I think, Jane Hume also was trying to get Philip Lowe to give commentary on government policy as well, where he politely declined. What do you make about all those kind of things, and I guess those comments around the interest rates from Stephen Jones as well?
Yeah, well, look, here's the thing, right? They like to give the appearance of the RBA completely disconnected from anything else, and they can then blame the RBA. The truth is, the RBA is part of the same infrastructure that includes the government and Treasury. On the board at the RBA is the head of Treasury, for example, right? So it's not like it's as simple as, they've put a dividing line down and nobody ever talks about the other side. The other point there is that it's clear that some politicians, some of the Greens, for example, even some Labor politicians, are actually saying, well, hang on a moment, is the RBA actually pulling the levers the right way at the right time, or are there other things that could be done? And therefore they are asking hard questions. Now, the truth is that the Treasurer has this sort of agreement with the RBA that the Treasurer won't talk about interest rates and that the RBA won't talk about government policy. So they've got this sort of Chinese walls arrangement set up. But it's a yin and a yang, isn't it? Because fiscal, in other words, what taxes are taken and what is spent, and interest rates are part of the same puzzle, right? And actually, maybe part of the difficulty we've got at the moment, and maybe this is something that the RBA review will come to, which is that, well, maybe this isn't working. Maybe we've got this sort of us and them created, and that means that everybody can point the finger at somebody else and nobody takes accountability and responsibility. And whilst Phil Lowe did say, I'm accountable, well, is he really accountable? How accountable is he? How, the fact that he said X and then Y happened with regard to interest rates, is he really accountable? I think there's some really big questions here. And I frankly came away at the end of this, this session thinking, well, I'm not sure we made much progress, but it was quite an interesting sport to watch.
As you said, sport. And look, Mark has said something kind of similar, although he has evoked musical theatre as well. He says, RE, the Reserve Bank Governor, he's between a rock and a hard place. The government of the day sets the policy and the independent board reacts to these policies by pulling the levers. Maybe he'll get to go and fly a kite later this year, as Mr. Banks did in My Fair Lady, says Mark.
I think there's some truth in that. And look, I wouldn't be surprised if we find that Lowe goes to September when his term ends, but he doesn't get renewed, because by that time the Treasurer will be able to say, well, we've taken all the hard medicine now, we can blame Lowe and the Reserve Bank, and now we're into moving on. I don't know, maybe that's too simplistic, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a change of leadership and a change of structure at the RBA. But look, in the meantime, the real concern I have is this is hurting real households and real businesses, and it's going to hurt more because we know that rates are going to go higher. The RBA said that again today. They won't tell you how high rates will go, but you've got to plan for higher rates and for longer. And that's going to have a significant impact on the economy. We could actually even see a recession later in the year if we're not careful. So, I mean, these are big, important issues. And sometimes I feel we get sort of lost in the weeds with regard to the politics of it. Strategically, this is a really, really big issue that we're dealing with at the moment.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for helping us wade through those weeds and navigate through them. And we'll talk to you again, perhaps when we find out, maybe there will be someone on the board who is, perhaps a low to middle income person with a mortgage. Who knows?
Great idea.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you, Martin. Thanks.
See ya.
Martin North there, the financial analyst, on ABC Illawarra with digital finance analytics in Thirroul.